Oh, several times. She brought, I remember one time she brought, well, Susan. Susan must have been like 8 or 9 years. No, no, maybe not that old, but she was big. And she brought Carolyn and Tommy, I suppose. No, I don't know Tommy, I guess. I know she always brought either 2 or 3 kids, the little ones, you know. And we had a great big old backyard, very big trees, and big garden, and then she and I just sat out all day long and talked.
Let the kids run.
Got the kids a little something to eat. There we sat. It was the little, our first little house that we had when we came back here from Texas. We lived in Texas once, Texarkana. I liked it down there. Ed did too, except he just had to get back to Missouri. And I said, I tell you what, it was in wartime, you know, and I was working at a big defense plant. I was in what's that area? Up in the administration area. I worked in the telephone office. And I loved my job, and it was good pay and everything, you know. No, it just had to go to Missouri. I said, you go up there, and I'll come later, maybe. So he didn't say anything. I guess he probably knew I wouldn't do that, but anyway, he didn't say anything. I told my chief operator, I said, Ed and I'm not about to move. When Ed does, she said, oh, you will too. And I said, no. We had about 12 girls out there. When it came time to move, nope, the last minute, boy, I was and about a day or so before, I couldn't stand to see Ed go away and leave me.
Well, I'll be curious if the old homestead is still standing, you know, because it was an old house and we lived there, and let alone another 20, 30 years on it.
Yeah. How about that warehouse? Is that there yet, too?
I don't have any idea. That's why I'm curious to go and see.
It's probably there.
Joanne, when she was a little girl, she, moved 22 times? By the time, you're 20?
By the time I graduated high school.
Yeah, by the time high school, she'd moved 22 times. And of course, we were in one place, you know, and then, of course, I've been in Gainesville now 35 years. And so I just don't move very often. So this traveling is good for me.
Yeah, kind of something new, too,
Although
isn't
when
it?
I was a kid, I'd been in all 48 states by the time I was 21.
You had?
Yeah. I did a lot of traveling with some other boys, 2 other friends in high school. We took a Model A and toured the country to Model A. All the way to Key West, up to Maine, all around.
I didn't like Key West when Mildred lived down there. We were down there one summer for a week or so. It seemed like there was not a lot of big bugs or something down there.
That's true.
Well, she didn't have a very good house that she lived in either. Maybe that had something to do with it. Ray was in the Navy. That's how come they were down there. It's kind of an interesting thing about them. They divorced. As I said, Mildred wasn't pleased about things. Why, goodbye. That's the way she lived. So they had a little girl, and no, a little boy too. And I don't know, she just left. And I mean, she took her kids with her, but she didn't like Ray anymore. So they divorced. And you know, 40 years later, now just last fall, Thanksgiving, Ray came down. He was up in Rhode Island. That's where it is. He came down here at Thanksgiving time with Judy, his daughter. Of course, she's 40 now, you know. She and her dad came down, called Mildred and said they were coming. Of course, Judy always kept in touch with her mother. And she said, my father and I are coming down to spend Thanksgiving with you. She said, we've already bought our tickets, so don't say no. so they came down all right. They stayed a week, but back. Well, in the meantime, last summer, Ray's wife died. He'd been married, all those years. And so she'd been invalid for a long time, and she died. And so Ray was free again. Well, they're going to live together again. He's 75. He has gout. He's not very well. And he's going to build her a house. He and his daughter have just been to France. He has relation over there, cousins and stuff. They were over there for a month. They wanted Mildred to go with them, and Mildred wouldn't do it. She said she didn't know anybody over there. She couldn't speak French, and they couldn't. Now they're back. Ray's trying to sell his house. He wanted Mildred to come up there, and she wouldn't do it. She likes the country. She didn't want to go to a big city. So, all right, he's going to sell his house out here, and he's going to build her a house. And she says, "We're not going to get married, though, Mother." And I said, "Well, you should." Anybody, when he lives with you, and you go any place and you have to introduce him, just say he's your house guest. I don't see anything wrong with that at all. And he's going to take care of her. I mean, well, she has enough to take care of herself, but he needs somebody to take care of him. Because Judy's in Boston. She works in a big hospital there. And she's a different generation than her father, of course, And she's real happy for him. She's an only child, see. And whatever Mildred has is Judy's, and whatever Ray has is Judy's. So anything they do is glad with. She's glad they're. If she had kids and he had kids,
This is interesting.
that's a different wrinkle. But everything's lovely, and she really wants it. Well, Ray walked into my house down here in the spring over there on the duplex at that Thanksgiving Day. And he came over to me, and he just hugged me and kissed me, just like he just left last week. He's been in my house when his kids were little, But this is like, he hasn't been away. He's a real nice fellow. Maybe they're going to get along now, after all these years. So.
Well, think of the fresh air.
I don't know, but you don't tell your kids what to do.
Never do. We're learning.
They're not going to listen anyway. So.
We're learning.
No. All you can do is tell them what they ought to do as they grow up, and hope they will. And then when they get grown up, they do what they want to do. Which I guess is the way it's supposed to be.
Well, I think it's kind of neat that they're getting back together.
I do too. But Judith kind of wants them to get married again, but Mildred said, "Why should we? There's all this changing, all this stuff, He was a chief in the Navy. He has a real good retirement. See, all those years, that was his career, for God knows how many years. And I know when Judith was born, we were in Norfolk. He was stationed there, and I remember he was a chief then. I guess different years, it was more. He had, stripes, and so he has a nice retirement. So, and Mildred works with there much she hasn't got a very good one, but it's adequate, and so I'm really glad for them. But I told her, I said, "You're not getting this for free." I said, "Remember, he's 75 years old and he doesn't have very good health. He has the opposite of diabetes, which is low blood sugar or something, And he's very well, but I don't know. He's a real easygoing guy, and I think Mildred isn't easygoing. She's kind of fiery. I mean, she thinks anything she says it. But maybe you can put up with her. She's better than she used to be. She's good to me. That's all I care.
That's important.
Well, it's interesting. I when you talk to Charlotte, tell her I feel kind of the same way she does. I like family.
Oh.
And I've been real negligent over the years, not keeping contact with you, because I guess I got so involved in my own problems that it never dawned on me until a couple years ago.
She said,
you know.
oh, mother, she said, oh, she just was really put out. She said, I
Would
just,
love to get together with her
I
at
was
some time.
wondering, when you all go back, I don't know for sure, but I don't believe they did plan to do all that other stuff, but I kind of think she told me one time that something had happened, they weren't going to do that.
How long are they going to be gone on this trip?
Well, at first it was going to be the rest of the summer. They were going to get a freighter and go to Norway and Sweden and Finland and over to St. Petersburg. And then she told me something. I don't remember what it was. It was quite a long time ago. But I kind of think that was canceled. Oh, yes. I believe she told me they couldn't get a freighter when they needed it or wanted it or something. But they may be back in maybe 2-3 weeks.
Well, before we leave, I want to get her address and phone number.
We could call and see.
If we go through Arizona, we certainly
see,
want
that's she'll be in New Mexico.
New Mexico, I meant, yeah.
Yeah. And she would just be tickled. And you just love her and you'd like Ray. Charlotte's, I don't know, they're just real fun people. And they'd love to have you.
She and Don have that in common, that they have degrees in psychology,
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, she did.
I'll bet we have a lot in common.
She, I don't know, Charlotte's, she has I tell you, from the time she was little, I don't believe she ever walked in a room that everybody didn't like her. The old people and the young people. That's kind of person. She's kind of bossy.
Well, I'm used to that. No, she's not that way.
Only when I have to be.
I know what you mean. You don't need to explain.
This is women talk,
Yeah,
though.
okay.
But Dale is a kind of quiet fellow. He has a degree from California someplace. I don't remember where. But he's a really nice guy, and they care a lot about each other. They've just been married at 18 years, I believe now. See, he married her after she had polio.
Wow.
But they worked in the same office before she went to Morocco. Not the same office, but the same division. She knew him, and she'd seen him, and that's all. And he was married then. And then when she came back, I don't know, 2 years later, why, they divorced, and I don't know what. Anyway, they just got to knowing each other better, and then but she didn't want to marry because she was happy not being married. She'd been divorced for a while too. But they finally got married. They're just fine. My mother used to, I always think of Ed as being good-natured like as Dale is. He was nice to her. My mother just adored him. My husband. When he'd come home from work, he'd go in there and he'd get her a big glass of water. She stayed at my house in the last few months before she died. She had cancer. And he'd get her she was supposed to drink water, and I couldn't get her to drink water. But soon he'd go get her one. They'd sit down there by the bed, and she'd drink that water just like a little lamb. And then they'd talk about Greenfield. See, Ed grew up down Greenfield, and he knew people down there, and my mother had lived down there, and she knew people. And I couldn't talk to her because I didn't know anybody down there. She'd say, well, Cleo, do you remember so-and-so? And so, no, Mother, I didn't know her. And one day she said, oh, my Lord, don't you know anything? I remember she said that to me. And but Ed could talk to her about all that stuff, and she was real happy. Yeah, I didn't know beans. But finally I got to saying, oh, I believe I do. Well, that's all she wanted.
62. So she was 62 when she died, your
Yeah,
mother?
she sure was. She had cancer.
Well, cancer of what? You know what kind?
Well, in her uterus someplace.
Is that
I don't
right?
know, someplace, some kind of female cancer. And she's well, Ed used to, she'd get real bad over there at the farm, over by, well, she didn't live down there. They moved over by Lockwood, that's west of town. And they'd call, my father would call, he'd say, he'd tell Mama was real sick, and I'd call out for Ed, and Ed would come home, and away we'd go and get her and bring her over to our house, or take her to the hospital or whatever. And then I kept her there for about 5 months.
Now, when did your dad die? What year do you?
I know he was 86.
He was 86.
Oh gosh, I don't remember.
Well, I can figure that out. He was born in 79, so that
Yeah.
would be 21. '65 he would have died then.
65. That's 30 years, huh?
65 and 21 is 86. And he died in Springfield or where?
No, he died over there to his farm in Lockwood. He didn't farm or anything, but he just lived in this little house. And so,
Is that the farm that you all used to go to?
no, that was down in Greenfield.
Oh.
And so he went to he went up to Lockwood every day, I believe it was. Anyway, he went into town. It was 10 miles every day. Ate his lunch, and he'd take his laundry in and wash it. You know, of course, he never ironed it or anything, but it was, you know, he cleaned. And one day he came back in the afternoon, and he had a flat tire, and so he got out of his car and he fixed it. If he had only waited for some of the neighbors to come by, you know, but no, he was the kind of guy who was going to do his own, and he did. Got back in the car and went home, and went in and sat in a big chair, put his feet up, and I guess he just leaned back like this.
Heart attack? Or?
Yeah, just like that. And it said he had a letter in his hand he was going to read. He just sat there like this. And he had a check in his pocket. Got some money. And so the neighbors back over across the field didn't see the light come on. So they came over and see him right after dark, you know, and he was dead.
I remember going down there, of course, going out with him to milk the cows, you know, and we'd be standing there, and pretty soon, you know, he'd be squirting at it.
Squirting at it.
Yeah, he'd squirt milk at us. As he was milking, he would just go.
He had some lambs. Were you there at this time and he had any lambs?
I
He had
suspect
some
so.
sheep. And they had a nice pasture and had a little stream through it, you know. It wasn't deep, but it was kind of wide, about like this. And those little lambs that the mother would go across, and there's the lamb stand over there hollering because he's afraid of that water. She'd go back, and then she'd come back, and just keep on yelling. And my father was always down there, and I can remember in a pair of rubber boots. Go get that lamb. He just spent all of that, you know, quite a while in the spring down there, putting them from one side to the other till they learned that water wasn't going to kill them. I really don't, you know, when Ruth would come down, well, I told you about that deal. She said that, you know, that if something would happen to Clint, she'd just sell out and come down here, which would have been a real good thing for her. And we got some real good schools here. And 5 high schools. I really didn't see her very much. When the kids were little, she'd come to that house where we had that little house we had with a big yard, and we had real nice summers there, because the kids weren't going to get run over, and there wasn't anything they could get hurt on, and you know. And then she came over on another house we had up where you stayed one night. We had an upstairs in the basement of that house. And she came there and stayed for a few. Clint came that time. Clint came that time. I guess the kids were grown up because she didn't bring anybody. But we really didn't see each other very much.
Well, what year would that have been about? Do you remember?
Well, it was, what, you mean when Ruthie?
Yeah, she and my dad came down.
Well, let's see. We lived in that other house, our last home we bought. It was all on the ground floor. We had to get out of that place with the upstairs. Let's see, it's 14, and I lived over there 7, that's 21. And it must have been 5 more. So it's close to 30 years, I'd say.
What year would that have been? 40s?
Well,
50s?
60s.
60s?
It was probably about the time my father died, or before. No, it wasn't before, it was after.
My mother died in 59.
How long was he in the nursing home?
6 months, I believe.
Oh.
I've heard that. I guess the kids found him. He'd fallen down in the house up on the 2nd floor. And I don't know which one. Maybe Carolyn found him when he'd fallen down.
Oh, did he live alone there?
Yeah.
Oh. Gosh, how old was he not then?
Well, he was 78, I think, when he died. But he didn't want anybody coming in taking care of him, or... And he liked being at that house there because he could go across the alley to the restaurant and mind everybody else's business, you know, up and down the alley.
Well, he probably didn't have all that much of his own to mind anymore. He could help with other ones.
That's all he had to do was help other people with their business.
When did he go out of beer business then?
Well, I was 19. Let me figure.
Oh, really?
I was 19. He wanted me to take it over, and I didn't think about it at the time, but it was a real compliment that he had that much confidence in me, you know. And of course, he would have been there looking over my shoulder. You know that. I wouldn't have had a minute's rest. And it was a couple of years later that he.
Sold it when you were in college?
Must have been around 54, 55.
I know last night, let's see, was it Mildred? I believe it was Mildred asked me if you looked like Clint, or if I was reminded of Clint or something.
Do you see any resemblances? I don't.
No.
Of course, maybe with
only
the
the shape of your face.
Is that right?
And his that's the only thing.
Yeah. Niall and I look an awful lot alike.
Do you?
Yeah. And then I'm going to send you some pictures. As soon as we get back to Florida, you're going to get some
Good.
pictures.
I'm glad. Oh, Charlotte will be so delighted.
Yeah.
Well, Mildred will too, but
Yeah.
in a different way.
Yeah. And, I'm going to be in contact with them also. So.
I really, I wish they wouldn't stay too long. I sure wish you folks could get in touch with me. I mean, while on this trip.
Mm-hmm.
I think you'd enjoy, I know they'd enjoy having you.
Well, we certainly get out there. We'll be pretty close to out there.
See, they just bought that place last summer, and they haven't lived there much.
I've never heard of Tyrone, New Mexico, though.
And I can't think of it half the time. I have to think of it in some movie star now, Tyrone Powers.
Tyrone Powers.
So she said she said it's on a high point, high desert, and it's cool there in the summer. And well, then in the winter they go down to Mesa, Arizona. That's where they spend the winters, down there near Mesa, Arizona. That's where she is now. Because of the hospital there. But they have their, I call one number, then I call another. And whichever one I'm lucky, I catch them. Yeah, that's the way they are.
That's great.
Last summer, they came up from New Mexico, or from Arizona. They didn't have that house in, and they stayed at our house for a while.
There's someone at your door. Do you want me to answer it?
They don't come in. They got a key. Come on in. They will anyway. Yeah.
I just wanted to return your nail polish.
Oh, honey, you didn't do
Hi, how are you?
Yeah, she's the one that gave me my manicure.
Very
Manicure.
Good job. Thanks, honey.
I'll be down later on. If
Okay.
you'd like, I can put a second coat on.
Did you ever catch May yet? To give her a manicure?
Yeah, I went down there. She decided she didn't want one. Got somebody else though. Jane. She came back.
Good.
Yeah.
Here, put it in there with you. Not 7.
Sure.
Any place.
Yeah.
Okay. She's the office manager, but one day a week she'll go down there and try to get those old ladies for a manicure, and they won't sit still that long for it. I told her to give me one first because I said I gotta be back by 10 o'clock at my door. And boy, she fixed me up the way I left, and she just couldn't get them to sit still long enough.
Well, do you have an address book that I can copy their addresses down, your daughters?
Yeah.
Can I get it, bring it out to you?
It's right in the back of the desk there, or maybe it's not. Is there one lying there? And
Is that it?
no, it's that bigger one. It might not. Yeah. That's it. Did I tell you when Earl died?
81.
Boy, he's a big one. The airport's out that way.
93, 92 or 93?
81.
81.
April 4th, 81. Let's see. Of course, Charlotte's got so many addresses in here. As I said, she changes, you know. I'd have 2 at a time, but
I haven't been able to find my mother's and dad's wedding day, and I'm going to have to look that up when I get home. Or, I guess, go to the courthouse. Well, these are about all the Lances. Of course, Miller's they've got a lot of cousins, you know, on that side too. Virginia, no, not. Virginia's my niece, Lee's daughter. Well, they're funny. You know how many children did Lee have?
Just that one girl.
One girl, and
Her name's Virginia. She was married, but she's not now. And that was an interesting thing. She wanted children so bad, and she couldn't have any somehow or other. And so she was and they lived down in, they lived in Texas then, down the valley. And she was always on the outlook for a little Mexican child. And she wanted to adopt it. Well, she was connected with some kind of a mission or something there. She and her mother helped the mission. Mexican women would come across the bridge, and women would teach them how to take care of the children. And how to sew and stuff. Anyway, Virginia got in touch somehow with now she was just about close to 40 then. But she's still determined she was going to get a baby if she could. So one day up at the office they called her, somebody did, and said, we got one. And this woman, the Mexican woman's having a child just right away. And Virginia dropped everything and went up there. She said she held that baby when it was only 30 minutes old, just so much fun. And she adopted it. This woman had come up from Mexico. She'd known her before somehow, but she'd go back, you know. She lived over there. They'd allow them to come over there and have health care and everything, but they'd go back at night. And this woman had a little girl, 12 years old. Now she had this new child. And she had promised somebody in this church, this mission, that she'd give it to this, whoever it was that wanted it, and that was Virginia. Well, that was it. She didn't even look at it. Her husband had died in the meantime. He had some kind of a disease that he'd come over here to get treated, and he died. Well, she had no way to make a living. She had nothing, and she knew that Virginia was a good person, you know, church, and she kind of known her or something. Anyway, Virginia took that baby home, and she called me that night. She says, "Oh, Aunt Cleo, guess what?" I said, "Yeah, you got your baby." She says, "I did." And I said, "Did you get a lawyer and do it legal?" She says, "Yes, ma'am." She says, "I've got it all tied up legally." So she's got this little girl. She's 4 years old now. And and you know what? She's dark as those kids. She's a Mexican baby, but she's real dark. But her hair is a little curly. I mean, it's kind of a loose curl. She's a pretty little girl. And of course, she just adores her. I've seen her. She brought her up here about, I guess it was last summer. She's a little tall, thin girl. Really nice little kid. But Virginia's a happy.
Wanted a baby, didn't she?
Yeah, she did. She sure did. So, and she wanted to be sure that she was going to keep her too. Now that's Lee's daughter. And as ornery as Lee is, I want you to know that he is crazy about this kid too. He's really crazy about her. And what he did, Virginia lived near them, Ruby and Lee. Virginia lived in her house. But Lee would go over there in the morning, get this baby, and I've got pictures on the basket, you know, and he's down on the floor fixing her in this basket. And then he'd take her over there he and Ruby would take care of her while Virginia went to work. And then he'd take her either up to the office, and Virginia would take her home, or he'd take Virginia over to her house with the baby. And then Virginia had her at night. So. But he just loved that baby. And he still does. They're separated now, Ruby and Lee.
How old is the girl now?
4. I think the 1st of November, she'll be 5. And let's see, Virginia, now she takes that little girl and she goes over to see Lee, because, see, they're not living together anymore. After 50 years, can you imagine it? They decided they wouldn't live together anymore. And but he's crazy about that little kid. And Virginia, you know, they go eat supper with her father. Virginia's, her name is Bethany. Bethany, what's that one? Esther, I believe it. 2 Bible names anyway. And they go eat supper with him. And once a week, she takes stuff over for him. But it's the strangest thing to think that people who live together for 50 years, and all of a sudden, I don't know why she didn't leave him 50 years ago.
If you're going to do it, do it.
I mean, 44. Really, he really was hateful to her. He can't help it. Charlotte, would go over there. She and Dale had been over there a time or two. And of course, she and Lee get into it right away. And she'd say, "Come on, Dale, let's go." And they'd get him home. He never came in our house. Ed couldn't stand him.
It's there.
He was terrible. Even Ruth didn't like him very well. And she, she always kind of felt sorry for him. She said, when the last time she's here, she said, "What's the matter with him?" That's just the way he is, that's all. So Ruby finally told him where to go. And he worked at the post office, all those years. And he has a good retirement. And Lee has a nickel of the first dollar he ever made. And Ruby said to me, I was talking to her, she's here in town with her sister now. She told me, she says, "Why, Cleo, I was so surprised. She said, I didn't know he had all those stocks and bonds and all that money." He never let her know a thing. She says, I knew we lived all right. He didn't give her any money, but he bought what they ought to eat, not what she wanted. Oh, he was a stinker.
That's the way my dad was. He kept control of the financial purse strings.
I know. One time when she was down here and she and I went shopping, and we were up to Levy Wolf's, and I had something, I don't know, that she liked, a dress, a knitted dress, I think. And I said, "Well, I'll take you up there where I bought mine." Oh, she says, "I don't think Cleo would buy me one." I says, "Hell, I don't care. Come on, I'll buy it for you." If he doesn't want to buy it, so what? I said, "You take your dress, I'll buy it." And we did live up there, and I bought a balloon. She bought a balloon. And we kind of eased it to Cleo. He paid me for it, though.
Well, when I was 14 and 15, he would still take me downtown to buy my clothes rather than giving me the money to go down and make my own selection, and so that's one thing that always bothered me, of course. I think growing up,
Yeah.
he really had control.
Yeah, he sure did. But I don't care. I knew Ed wouldn't care. Ed wouldn't care that. He'd think that, well, that was Cleo's business. He didn't have to. But he'd just buy Ruth a dress. And I remember she also told me that, let's see what I'm going to tell you about. Oh, I believe it was for your wedding that he had a suit. I don't know how old it was, and it didn't fit him anymore.
Probably
It was just, it was too big for him. And so he either had to get a new suit or get this cut way down suit. And so he chose to have it remade. She didn't go for that. She made him get a new suit. But I imagine that was a little difficult. But she said he wanted to take back. She said he was poor. He couldn't afford a suit. But as my father said, well, you know how to take care of his money. That's why he's got money.
Tell you a little funny story that after I went to Florida and I was assistant dean of students there, I went home one time and he said, "Donnie, I'd like to take you down to the senior citizens dance with me." And I said, "No, I don't want to go down." He says, "I'd like you to meet some of my friends down there." And I said, "Oh, okay, I'll go." So we went down to the senior citizens dance. He danced with this one lady, then she, he dances over, and then she wanted to dance with me. And we danced for about a minute. She said, "Oh, your dad's a much better dancer than what you are." And then he would introduce me. He said, "This is my son, Donnie. He's the head dean at the University of Florida." And I'd get him off the side, and I said, "Dad, I'm an assistant dean of students. I'm the lowest form of life that there is." And, the next person that come along, "This is my son, Donnie. He's the head dean at the University of Florida," Okay, that's, because he really didn't understand. He didn't have any education. He didn't understand the hierarchy or what it meant. That's how he was really impressed,
Sure.
So I said, "That's fine." But those are the things, like I said, tried to say yesterday, that my mother never got to see, because she died, like I say, she saw me get my master's degree. She was at the graduation, and then they got married the next day, and then 20 days later she passed away.
Yeah. Oh, I remember Clint called that morning. I was working part-time at House Country Club, booking. I helped him out there. We got payroll out and stuff, you know. And I'd already gone out. It was early in the morning, and Ed called out. He said, Clint called me. He said, and oh boy, I hollered. I remember, and the people over in the pro shop, man and his wife ran that. Yeah, I don't know how they knew it. Maybe I just don't know. But anyway, they came rushing over there, and I remember he drove me home, and then I guess Ed drove me back or something. I can't remember. Anyway, I lived about 2 or 3 miles, so yeah, and so Ed told Clint we'd be there. I guess the next morning, I can't remember. We were there. And he wanted me to choose her casket. And so Richard and I went over there with him. And we did. And we didn't get it cheap. We didn't. I said to Richard, I got him over there, and I said, now, Richard, we're not going to have it cheap. Your father can afford a good one. But we didn't look at the price on him. We got the pretty one, and we didn't care how much it cost. Clint didn't say a word. But I know he's pretty tight. My father said, that's how you get your money, you save it. Yeah, my dad always did say that. He thought, but Clint was okay, by golly.
Up to an extent, but, you can't take it with you.
No. Oh, you heard, I don't know if you said it or what, but some of you kids said, Pa's going to take his with him. He's got pockets in his shroud. Yes, those kids did. I don't know which one of you.
He's got pockets in his what?
In his shroud. Yes, he is, somebody said. Can't take with you. Yes, you can. Pa's got pockets in his shroud. Yeah, I just thought that was kind of funny. Clint didn't care. He knew yeah, they said it right in front of him. Couldn't bother him.
Yeah, during his last few years, I went home one time. Of course, I was the administrator for the estate. And I knew at that time that each kid could get $3,000 a year tax-free. And I talked with him. I said, I'd like to take you, go to an attorney, and we need to talk about your will and so forth. Fine, We got there in the attorney, and I said, would you please explain to him about being able to give each kid $3,000 so that you don't have the inheritance tax? And he explained it, and he looked at my dad, and he said, would you like to do that? My dad said, no. And the attorney said, well, he says what it's going to boil down to is that you'll either give it to your kids now, or you're going to give most of it to Uncle Sam later on. My dad never answered the question. But the reason he didn't want to do it then, because Tom was raising so much hell, he didn't want to give Tom $3,000 and have him see what he would do with it, So Tom held the rest of us up of, starting to split up that estate at the time where, I forget how much money we paid in inheritance. It was $200,000, I think, in inheritance tax alone.
Mm.
See, I think he had about $600,000.
Yeah, I figured he had quite a bit. But why couldn't, and as Madeline used to say, Clint build her a house all on the ground floor. And he wouldn't do it. And he should have.
Yeah.
She could have had a beautiful house for, on the ground floor. Everybody have a bedroom for crying out loud. He could afford it. He could do it. I don't know. There's just some people like that.
Again, it was what I explained a while ago with him. He had all of his buddies on that alley right there, and that's what he would have been out of place himself, so he was thinking of himself as opposed to my mother, He wanted to live there because that's where all of his buddies were.
But he should have done it. But I know Madeline really put pressure on him.
Oh, yeah.
didn't
Madeline
look
was a
good.
wonderful person.
I didn't know her too well.
She took me one summer down to Des Moines with her, and I stayed with her for a while, and she got sick and had to go to the hospital. Well, she just let me take her car and drive her car back to Mason City. Well, I've never been out on the highway by myself before, but she was just so trusting and just, you know, treated me so nice.
You know, she thought she had the Father Redenbaugh from the Episcopal Church sewed up one time. Father Redenbaugh, he was a tall, good-looking fellow, priest, whatever. And, but that didn't happen. But she sure wanted to marry him, boy.
Is that right? I hadn't heard that
yeah.
before.
He's a good-looking guy, too.
I have an article about her going into medical school. Of course, she had the polio, and it was during the time when women were starting to be activists for all the women's rights and, you know, and different things like that. And she said, you know, in her article, I didn't need any extra privileges because they respected me in medical school back at Michigan, you know, where she went. And it's just a wonderful article. You know, there's so many, the government is giving people so many things these days, you
She
know.
did it on her own.
She did it on her own. She says, I had respect of the fellow men that
How
were.
about John? He tried it, and didn't he have bad eyes or something?
He had that eye.
That's
yeah.
her brother.
Yeah. I don't know where he's at now. See, I've lost contact with him. I don't know if he's alive or